Gentleman from Wayne, Representative Bell, is recognized for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, the journal for September 22nd has been examined and found to be correct. I move to be approved as written.
Representative Bell moves that the journal for September 22nd be approved as written. All those in favor will say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the journal is approved as written. Ratifications of bills and resolutions. Clerk will read.
Enroll bill, September 23, 2025. The enrolling clerk reports the following bill duly ratified for presentation to the governor. Senate Bill 245, an act to authorize additional remote renewals of driver's licenses to eliminate the driving log requirement and authorize remote issuance for full provisional licenses to make a technical correction related to possession of embalming fluid and to make various appropriations.
Members, the chair has a couple of courtesies the gallery today will go ahead and take up. Upon motion of Representative Arp of Union County, the chair is happy to extend the courtesies of the gallery to Mia Alessandri, who is shadowing Representative Arp today, and she is a recent graduate of Appalachian State University. If you will, stand so we can recognize you. I think she's in the back. Thank you for being with us today. Upon motion of Representative Monica Johnson-Hostler from Wake County, the chair is happy to extend the courtesy of the gallery to Gabrielle Scott and the National Council of Negro Women in recognition of their Advocacy Day. If you will, stand so we can recognize you. Thank you for being with us. Upon motion of the chair is happy to extend the courtesies of the gallery to Claudia Davis from Moms Ain't Playing and a group of interns here today from the John Locke Foundation. If you will, stand so we can recognize you. Thank you for being with us today. Chair is pleased to appoint Callie Reagan Godley of Union County on behalf of Representative Zinger to serve as an honorary page of the House today. Callie, if you will, stand so we can recognize you. Thank you for being with us today. Members, we do have a couple of representative statements to recognize, to read into the journal. Representative Hastings submitted a representative statement commemorating the Kaiser Elementary School's 100th anniversary, and Representative Branson submitted a representative statement congratulating the North Carolina Folk Festival, and without objection, those will be spread across the journal. So ordered. Okay, members, we'll go ahead and go into our calendar now. We'll begin at the top. Mr. Clerk, House Bill 307. The clerk will read.
Representative Stevens, House Bill 307, a bill to be entitled Iryna's Law, the General Assembly of North Carolina enacts.
The lady from Mecklenburg, Representative Cotham, is recognized for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To motion to concur.
Representative Cotham,
debate the bill.
Representative Cotham moves that the House do concur with Senate Committee Substitute Number 2 to House Bill 307. The lady is recognized to debate the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I ask for your grace as I have a broken jaw while I do these remarks, so please bear with me. Mr. Speaker and members, I know that everyone in this room and all who are watching today back home are aware of the very tragic killing of Iryna in Charlotte. As you likely know, Iryna escaped a war zone and came to Charlotte for a better life and a better future, and her future was going to be bright. She loved animals, children, the arts, her friends, her boyfriend, and her family. She worked at a local restaurant and was looking forward to getting her driver's license in October. Since she didn't have a vehicle, she had to rely on public transportation. Finishing her late night shift one terrible night, she got on our light rail in Charlotte after long days of work, and she was tragically murdered by a deranged monster. I'm sure she was looking forward to going home just to get up to go to work the next day. But she never made it. This sweet and beautiful young woman was full of potential. And a monster who already had 14 previous convictions, including and not limited to armed robbery, felony larceny, and the list goes on. A diagnosed schizophrenic. He was released by a magistrate without a secured bond, and the magistrate ignored all the very obvious red flags, including his erratic behavior just recently before this event that the police brought forward. He joined the city streets of Charlotte with nothing but a piece of paper where he promised on his honor, which he had none, to return back to court. You can guess how that turned out. He should have never been allowed out of the jail. The catch and release practices for violent offenders will end today with your support. This heinous act was preventable and is a direct result of judicial officials being too soft on crime and allowing too many criminals to have a revolving door that come into our neighborhoods and into our communities. These violent offenders are wreaking havoc, not just in Charlotte, but all over our North Carolina and in everyone's district. Over the last few weeks, even though I've not been able to talk, I've certainly heard and listened to and read the many stories and the many fears from moms, from young women who are studying at UNC Charlotte, from police officers, from business owners, and for those who must rely on county transportation every day just to go to work and provide for their family. They are distraught with what is happening in our city. They're scared. I'm scared. We want a state where families can grow, they can live, and they can thrive for generations. That's what makes North Carolina great. Unfortunately, growing and surging crime impacts all of us and our state. Iryna left war-torn Ukraine for new opportunities to come to the greatest country there is. She was contributing to society. She added value. She should be here today. She should be practicing her smile for her upcoming driver license photo. You've all seen her picture. She was beautiful. So sweet, lovely, so young. It's so full of life and an amazing future ahead of her. But a monster ended that for her that terrible night. As many of you know, in this chamber, we are bound by certain procedural rules of what we can do right now today and what we cannot. And I know that we will continue to look at all of these issues and to have further legislative action. This gets to start the process of toughening our criminal laws, looking at magistrate reform, and so much. I hope that all of you in here, regardless of your political affiliation, regardless of where you are in North Carolina, that we can all join together, because this type of story is in everyone's district. I have heard from many of your constituents. It's not just Charlotte, but Charlotte is getting out of control, unfortunately. I am going to go through some of the general overviews of Iryna's law, and then my colleague, Representative Sarah Stevenson, will go over some in more detail. We must keep our criminals who commit these dangerous crimes behind bars and off our streets. We must ensure that judges consider assault offenses during pretrial release process. We must ensure, and this will be a new addition, that any crime, any and all crimes that include that you must be on a registry, any sex offense, statutory rape of a child, rape 1 and 2, that you will now, this will be a part of the pretrial release. These 18 crimes include and are not limited to first and second degree kidnapping, human trafficking, first degree burglary, first degree arson, shooting up a house or dwelling or your business, assault with a deadly weapon, robbery with firearms, trafficking, human trafficking, fentanyl, death by distribution of a controlled substance, breaking and entering with the terrorize to injure or cause harm. So now all of those will be included in the pretrial release. We must eliminate the condition of a release of a defendant on the written promise to appear. It is astounding to me that a man with a monster with 14 previous convictions, who has known mental health, was homeless, his get out of free card was literally a written piece of paper where he said, "I'll be back." That's wrong. That ends today if you support this bill. No more gentle reminders to come back to court. Defendants with 3 or more offenses of our Class 1 misdemeanors within the last 10 years, they will now have to have a secured bond or house arrest. We must hold our judges accountable by requiring them to write a written statement of facts that will go into the record of the case. Why did you release this person? What was your thinking? That's accountability. That's transparency. We deserve to know that. Victims' families deserve. We also added in here, if a murder occurred on public transportation, the district attorney may use that as an aggravating factor in a murder case. We will create additional accountability for magistrates by allowing the Chief Justice to initiate suspension of a magistrate. We will direct the administrative office of the courts to create rules of conduct for magistrates that address conflicts of interest. They will find some. In Mecklenburg County, as a large population and with soaring crime, this provides funding to add 10 assistant district attorney positions for Mecklenburg County and 5 legal assistants for Mecklenburg. I ask you today to think of Iryna, of her family. And unfortunately, there are so many others. Just this weekend, there was another one. It could be you, could be your daughter, could be your pastor, could be your child's teacher. We must take a hard stance on crime. We cannot have the revolving door that these terrible criminals leave the court, don't go to jail, and keep committing crimes. It's a sad state of affairs, but it is the reality. And you have a chance today to stop it and to stand up for not just Iryna, but for so many others, and to prevent. I ask you to vote to support and make sure that all of North Carolina is safe. We have a lot of work ahead of us. Let's continue to work together. Let's always remember the victims and their families. Too much talk is always given about the criminal. That's wrong. We should focus on the victims. Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I ask for your support for Iryna's law and to stop crime in North Carolina.
For what purpose does the lady from Durham, Representative Moyer, rise?
To speak on the bill.
Lady is recognized to debate the motion.
We say a prayer in this body before we start a session, and we pray to God, and we talk about kindness, we talk about mercy, we talk about justice, and then we have a bill come up, and what do? We call out a monster. Our president calls this person an animal. Boy, do our Christian values go down the tube within an instant. I'm going to talk to you as my experience over 18 years as a judge who set bond, who set bail, who supervised magistrates. And the one thing I want to do is get some facts out and not fiction and pure emotion about what our criminal justice system is and does. We cannot judge this crime based on press conferences where the Democrats have been blamed to be pro-criminals, where a press conference where a Democrat governor and a North Carolina justice are blamed for this crime, where a congressman demands a judge be fired and held personally liable for a cashless bail system. None of that follows the facts of what happened in this case. This crime was absolutely horrible. We were all appalled, in shock, and I would say this crime probably could not have been prevented. There was an officer 20 feet away. Was he able to jump into the car and stop it? No. Many of us have seen the horrible video. It was about 3 seconds. And yet we talk about the person alleged in this crime, how he got out on a promise to appear, even though that was 8 months before this happened in Charlotte. 8 months. And why was he brought before a magistrate in January? Because he was at a hospital saying he had material in his head. He was obviously going through a mental health crisis. Obviously going through a mental health crisis. And what did the officer do? They could have gone to a mental health professional and gotten an involuntary commitment. What did the officer do? Handcuffed, and let's take him to a magistrate. Let's book him on a criminal charge of misuse of a 911 system. It is not a violent offense. And that magistrate went to the suggested bail guidelines. And because of that charge, gave a written promise to appear which is common, and in all of your districts, or most of them, you have suggested bail guidelines that your magistrates follow, your judges follow, and you will see that is one of the options if there is not a victim and it is not a felony and they can promise to come back. And guess what? After his first appearance before a magistrate and he got a promise to appear, he came back. He didn't fail to appear to court. He came back for his next court dates and finally got an evaluation, I think in July, for mental health. He didn't go to that. But don't correlate what happened in January and a magistrate who set a bail according to guidelines to what happened in August. There is no correlation. And so the political theater that we are soft on crime and Republicans are tough on crime is just that. It is political theater. I was never soft on crime as a judge in sentencing or in punishment. I followed the statute. Violent offenders were put in jail or prison. So don't take facts you don't know and blame a magistrate for something she was not responsible for and have the President of the United States enter in, Congress enter in, this body enter in before you know what the facts are. And so, okay, let's look at this bill. Are we really being tough on crime? Is this your tough on crime response to this? Number one, we're boasting, oh, it will end our cashless bail system. No, it doesn't. It may say failure or orders to appear on your own recognizance are not allowed anymore, but unsecured bonds are still allowed. You don't have to put up a dime. There's still unsecured bonds in here. So are you ending a cashless bail system? No. It doesn't set any bail amounts or suggested guidelines for bails like your districts have, that your Superior Court judge and your Chief District Court judge set for your district. I set ours in Durham. $1 million bonds is the suggested bond amount for B1 felonies. $250,000 for C felonies. I can go through it. I have many county, Wake County, Durham County, Greensboro. If you would like to see your suggested bond amounts, is there any suggested bond amount for a violent offender in this? No, it says a secured bond. So a judge, a magistrate, a judge could give, oh, okay, $500. Why didn't we do tough on crime? You want suggested bond amounts? It's certainly not in here. Does it do anything to identify people who are in a mental health crisis before the fact and not after the fact of crime? It does not. Does it fund anything for mental health services or for beds to deal with these crisis people that we do need to get in a committed situation and off the streets? There isn't a dime in here except for transportation to evaluations. It fails to offer any protocol for law enforcement who deal with first responders to mental health crisis, take them to a mental health facility. You are not helping anything with handcuffs and going to a magistrate. And then we have other versions of this, sections of this bill that have nothing to do with preventing or tough on crime. Because one of it is, okay, let's have the General Assembly, the legislature, ignore separation of powers, and we're going to start telling the judiciary what to do. We're going to tell the judiciary time limits on motions for appropriate relief. We're going to tell the Chief Justice he has new duties and powers to supervise magistrates, even though there are hundreds of magistrates across the state that are now being supervised directly by Chief District Court judges. And we were asked in the press conference, if you have proposals, send them in. Many of us on this side did send them in. Progressive Caucus sent in 3 pages of proposals. We talked about improving involuntary commitment procedures. We talked about getting more money for GPS ankle monitors. We talked about have a judge appoint a guardian to a person who is ordered for an outpatient mental health evaluation to ensure they go through. We talked about, and my colleague from Charlotte, let's get better light bulbs for the transit for security in Charlotte. We got down to specifics. Were we ever called to say, come in and let's discuss, let's really have a sensible, smart response to this? No. Tough on crime doesn't only mean let's pay attention to punishment after the fact, it also means what can we do to prevent the crime, which this bill before you completely fails to do. I have been told, I've heard, this is a first step. Well, this first step has been tripped up. Let's do a real first step. Let's talk to people who know about these things, a federal prosecutor, a judge for 18 years who saw these every day. You want to do a first step? Let's come together. We grieved the murder. It was senseless, it was horrible. But what you are voting on today does nothing to take it back or would have prevented it. Let's get smart on crime. Thank you.
What purposes the gentleman from Columbus, Representative Jones, right?
To debate the bill, sir.
Gentleman's recognized to debate the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to take a little approach, members, differently than where we've had it here in the last few moments. Taking a father's perspective. I have 2 daughters, pretty close in that age. Beautiful like this young lady was. I just want you to imagine, as a parent, your child fleeing a worn, torn country because of the devastation that she and her family and her neighbors are experiencing. She wants to be somewhere safe. She wants to be somewhere where she's accepted, somewhere that she knows that she can have a better future. So she leaves for the greatest country, America. She comes here. She's productive. She tries to do everything right. She's working hard. She's bought her a car. She's studying to get her driver's license. And for no reason, her life was ripped from her. I'm sure every one of us watched the video, and the horror in that child's face. Could you imagine looking at your murderer who calculated this murder, very aware of what he was doing, had the knife, opened it up, waited for the opportunity, and he ended her life. We just heard some buzzwords: kindness, mercy. Gosh, you're not showing that. Well, he damn sure didn't show it to her, now did he? Where was his kindness? Where was his mercy? Ending a life for no reason. Ridiculous comments. Want to talk about Christian values? Yeah, I've got Christian values. We've got to have that mercy. And it hurts me to forgive him. I don't want to, but I got to. But it is not right the wrong. We heard some legalese, facts. Here's a fact: she's dead. She's not coming back. And this monster did kill her. Ridiculous to think any otherwise. This is not a Republican matter. This is not a Democrat matter. This is not a racial matter. This is right. This is wrong. He was wrong. This is a step to right what we can do in this state. We owe it to this child. We owe it to the people in this state to do the right thing to protect one of our own who came here, who trusted us. that she would have the protection to have a vibrant, beautiful future. You've got children. Swap places for one moment and think about your child looking up in those murderous eyes. Her last vision is a guy taking her away from everything. Her family, her home, her boyfriend, the future she was going to build. Mercy? Yeah, no mercy on that. And he showed no mercy, and we need to make sure that we're doing the right thing to send those who are doing these evil, evil crimes and give them the punishment they so justly deserve.
For what purpose does the lady from Guilford, Representative Harrison, rise?
To debate the bill.
Ladies recognized to debate the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would just, ladies and gentlemen of the House, I wasn't going to speak, but after the bill was changed yesterday in the Senate, I thought I should give some of the history of the death penalty in North Carolina. Obviously, I agree with all my colleagues. This was a gruesome crime. But what this bill proposes to do regarding the death penalty is not going to act as a deterrent and really isn't going to solve this problem. And so y'all know I've been around a long time. Back in 2005-06, we had a series of exonerations of innocent individuals who had been imprisoned and charged with the death penalty. And we put together a bipartisan study committee. I happened to be on it, and former Speaker Hackney chaired it, and we did a real deep dive into the history of the death penalty in this country. And so I just want to give you a little background and talk about some of the alternatives that are being offered, because I think it will give you a different perspective of that very important piece of this bill, which I think deserves a lot of attention. So one thing that I'm going to emphasize very much is that it's time and time again, it has not been proved to be a deterrent. There's that, and it's way more expensive than holding somebody in prison for life. And often the victims' families actually don't want this. And we've had 12 exonerees, and the public thinks that we probably already executed an innocent individual. There is evidence that 1 in every 25 people sentenced to death in the United States is innocent. As I said, 12 since the 70s in North Carolina have been found innocent. Y'all remember Henry McCollum? 30 years in prison, mentally ill, showed up on those Racial Justice Act filers that were sent out in 2010 election. And that individual had a disability, sat in jail for a long time, and now in prison, and now he's out, exonerated. We know that we have a racially biased criminal justice system. That came out of the death penalty committee that we were on, and it came out of the discussion on the Racial Justice Act. It's only since it dates back to Jim Crow, and it's only been since the 70s that the North Carolina courts have attempted to create a death penalty with the appearance of racial neutrality. So people of color make up less than 30% of North Carolina's population, but are 60% of those on death row. Prosecutors excluded black jurors from capital trials at more than twice the rate of white jurors. Nearly half the people on death row have had an all-white jury of one person of color on the jury. Defendants are much more likely to be sentenced to death if they're accused of killing a white person. And 11 of 12 exonerees in North Carolina are people of color. I'm only telling you this because I've been studying this issue for a really long time, and it's troubling to me to think that we're going to pull the trigger to start these death penalty, these executions, without thinking through the proper steps, because there's an important piece in this bill that expedites the consideration of the death penalty. All right, so in modern times, prosecutors used animal imagery to describe black defendants. In 2009, it was that we enacted the Racial Justice Act in recognition of the long, fraught history of the death penalty in North Carolina. It is extremely unpopular in this state and in the country. 47% of Americans believe only 47% of Americans believe it's applied fairly. Other national polls show that the majority of people from all political parties oppose the death penalty for people with mental illness and history of severe trauma. And in 2019 poll of NC voters said the majority supported alternative punishments rather than the death penalty. Many because they feel, 70% feel like an innocent person has been executed. So it doesn't, I'm just saying this doesn't reflect North Carolina modern values. There was a 1990s era law that all prosecutors had to pursue the death penalty in case of capital crime. It wasn't until 2001 that was repealed, and at that time we were the only state in the country with that law. We have a lot of people on death row who were convicted under that law that didn't have the chance to have a fair trial. Okay, let me talk a little bit more about the people who are actually on death row now that will be executed if we pass this bill and the governor signs it. Virtually every single person on death row falls into one of these vulnerable populations: severe mental illness, intellectual disability, or a history of brain injury or dysfunction, suffered severe childhood trauma, including rape, beatings, and torture. People who raised in poverty, many of which experienced malnutrition and homelessness. People who committed crimes before the age of 25, a time of life when the brain is not fully formed. People who served honorably in the U.S. military and in some cases suffered from PTSD. People who are only convicted of felony murder, which means that they may not even have pulled the trigger or had actually committed the crime, but they were there when it happened. And people who are now elderly, frail, and infirm. We know that many of the people who are on death row didn't receive fair trials as a result of who were convicted prior to the 2001 reforms. Some of the instances are trial attorneys who were later disbarred or officially sanctioned, trial attorneys who were completely inexperienced, defense attorneys who egregiously failed to investigate cases or present evidence on behalf of their clients, evidence that was withheld, falsified, or misinterpreted, witnesses who were compensated, sometimes secretly, for their testimony, lost or destroyed evidence. I'm telling you all this stuff because before I sat on that death penalty committee, and listen to all of this history of the really fraught history in our state, I was a proponent of the death penalty. And after we had those discussions and listening to some of the recommendations that came before that committee, there was no way I could support the death penalty in the state and the way it's carried out. But I want you to know why it is so flawed. So that provision that was added in the Senate tells the AOC or the DAC to consider an alternative method because we are not executing anyone right now because a lethal injection has been found to be flawed. So here we got firing squad executions requiring correction officers to directly face another human being from only a few feet away and shoot them in the heart. And even then, they don't often do a good job. Electrocutions, they're even more gruesome. We stopped that a long time ago because they were so gruesome. They literally cook the prisoner to death. And sometimes they begin bleeding from their faces. People who have witnessed this have described it as horrific. Nitrogen gas is a novel method that's been used recently. First time in the world last year in Alabama, Louisiana in March. Each of those who witnessed it talked about the specter of torture. Now, lethal injections, even that hasn't been great, even though we can't do it now because the drugs aren't available. But even then, sometimes the executioners have tried multiple times to try and start the IVs, and the different drugs available haven't done the trick, and it's also been a problem. So, this murder was gruesome. We need to do something about it. A lot of what we need to do about it is to deal with the mental health crisis in our state. But restarting the death penalty and you and I and the rest of the state of North Carolina having these people executed in our name, I don't know if you want to go there. I'm going to be a no.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Mecklenburg, Representative Brown, rise?
To speak to the bill.
I'm going to recognize to debate the motion.
Thank you. Before I get started, I want to take a moment to uplift Iryna Zaruska, her family, friends, the Mecklenburg County community, and the entire state of North Carolina as we deal with this. It's rocked our community. I've spent a lot of time these past few weeks talking with folks across neighborhoods in my district, across Mecklenburg County, about what we want from our community. Because regardless of whether you believe in it, regardless if that's your thought process, every single one of us, all 11 million North Carolinians, are in a community partnership. Each of us living together are living in an unspoken agreement. When you go to merge lanes in the highway, like I did coming up here today, you do so with the expectation that the other cars are going to let you get over. When you take your families out to eat at night, you do so with the expectation that all of y'all are going to get home safely. When you cross the street, like many of us do outside this building, you do so with the expectation that you know you're going to get to the other side. It's a partnership that we're all part of. When incidents of random, senseless, horrific violence occur, it disrupts that societal agreement, and it shakes our commitment in our communities because it violates our shared trust. And when that happens, the people of our community look to us. The people are asking for solutions. They want to ensure that these types of random, horrific acts of violence never happen again. We all saw that horrific video. The people across Mecklenburg County are angry. The people across the nation are angry. I'm angry. It never should have happened. But because what happened last month, the people are now asking us for answers. They're asking us, how was this allowed to happen? How do we make sure it happens again? And what are we going to do to ever prevent tragedies like this from happening? And like many of you, you heard these questions, and our first response is to act, to do something, to talk to folks, to make something happen. But oftentimes, in that innate need to make something happen, to fix these problems, we overreact. We overcorrect. We don't look at what the actual issues are, and we make a decision that's not going to fix the issues that we're trying to solve. Every single one of us in this building has a lot of responsibility, and we have to use that responsibility wisely. There's no one singular solution to the issues that caused that incident last month on the light rail in Charlotte. There's not one singular thing that could have prevented that issue. And there's not one singular thing in this bill that we're going to be voting on that would have prevented what happened. I wish there was a magic wand that we could wave and we could fix this. But it's going to take real hard work and multiple different avenues to keep our state safe and address the real problems facing our community. We absolutely have to give the police more resources. We absolutely have to give our judges more resources. We absolutely have to give our DAs, the public defenders, everyone more resources. But the reality is we have to recognize that if we give the DAs additional resources, it means nothing if we don't give additional clerks, additional public defenders, so they can clear the dockets and move on with these cases. Changing the involuntary commitment procedures does nothing if we don't put the resources to back it up. We have to address the root issues, and that takes hard work, deliberation, and thoughtfulness. We must stop puffing our chest out. We have to stop bolstering, using inflammatory language, and be serious with ourselves and say the reality that we have a mental health crisis in this country, and we are not addressing it. On January 19th, 2025, officers responded to 200 Hawthorne Lane in response to a check the welfare call for service at approximately 2100 hours. Once on scene, officers spoke with the defendant, DeCarlos Brown, who advised that he believed someone gave him a man-made material that controlled what he ate, when he talked, walked, etc. Brown wanted officers to investigate this man-made material that was inside of his body. Officers advised Brown that the issue was a medical issue and that there was nothing further they could do. Brown became upset with the officers' answers, and with officers still on scene, called 911 to speak with police. After Brown got off the phone with 911, he was placed under arrest and charged with misuse of 911. That was the arrest that DeCarlos Brown was made. Justice must be served. Let's be clear about that. Mr. Brown must face justice, and justice must be served. But this tragedy could have been prevented before it occurred. I've stood on this floor before, and I've mentioned our need for serious mental health reform. This bill calls for a study of mental health in the justice system. Every single one of us knows the study is only as good as the paper it's written on. But right now, today, we don't need a study. We know what needs to be done. Because if we're willing to listen, we have had people from every level, the community, mental health, public health, law enforcement, the courts, the prisons, every single person in our community who is actually dealing with these issues can tell you exactly what mental health resources need to happen and what needs to be done. My very first term, I sponsored a bill that provided multidisciplinary resources to work with law enforcement in Mecklenburg County, Pitt County, and Guilford County. And that program has been established, at least in Mecklenburg County, since 2021 to go out and provide mental health resources along with law enforcement, and it's been wildly successful in a lot of places. That's something that we know we can do. That's something that we have done. Didn't need a study to get that done. We know exactly what type of mental health resources we need in our communities, in our schools, but we just haven't listened. A study is too late. We already know the solution to the problem that we're trying to fix right now. A study won't deliver justice. Investing in real mental health resources and giving our courts the tools, our law enforcement officers the tools they need, just may prevent the next tragedy from happening. How many years, how many times each year do we pass a bill that has someone's name in the bill? So-and-so's law, a brother, a sister, a son, a daughter. Each of them a tragedy, each of them something that has shocked our community to the core, of people who are mourning. How many more times are we going to be on this floor voting on a bill that's named after someone who's gone too soon? We're going to keep being on the floor voting on these bills until we get serious and address the root causes of all of these issues.
What purpose does the lady from Mecklenburg, Representative Budd, arise?
Speak to the bill.
Ladies recognized to debate the motion.
Thank you. I find it utterly appalling that it took this murder of this young woman to become a public event that went viral before anyone noticed. I live in Charlotte, and I read the headlines, and I'm familiar with what goes on in that city. And so when she was murdered, I took note. I was aware it had happened. North Carolina, in the General Assembly, did nothing. It was not until the video was released by Katz, and it went viral, and the White House noticed that suddenly we gave a damn. And now here we are. But now that we have your attention, I will say this. We can no longer pay lip service to the idea of public safety, and we can no longer wish away the consequences of ignoring severely mentally ill people to remain untreated. The bill that has been presented, and you have heard my colleagues, you have heard from people in the other chamber and your constituents, and there are a lot of problems with this bill. The process is number one. The exclusion of people who have spent their entire professional careers in public service in the form of judges and prosecutors and defense attorneys, law enforcement, they were not brought to the table. What started weeks ago and is still happening today is this rage rhetoric It is inflammatory. It is disparaging to the city of Charlotte, Mecklenburg County, our local elected officials on city council and county commissioners. It is disparaging to everyone who has worked so hard to make this a great state, including the Charlotte-Mecklenburg area. What I will also say is that now that we have your attention, let us put down the rage and the rhetoric. Let us just put that down. Let us do what the people across North Carolina have been telling us for years. They're tired of extremes. They are asking for solutions to very real problems that they encounter in life, and one of those is feeling safe on their streets. And that's not a city problem. That is city, rural, suburban. It's across the state. They have also asked for real solutions when it comes to the diagnosis, treatment, and care of those who are mentally ill. Whether they have a roof over their head or they live on the streets or they're incarcerated, they are asking us to put down the extremes and, for the love of all that's good and holy, provide us with solutions and tools and resources so that we can address them. So as I say this, I'm going to point out the glaring deficiency in this bill. There is no money. There is no money to fund what I asked in a letter sent to leadership for 5,000 more police officers to be deployed across the state on the local level, city, county, and other municipalities. I also asked for 5,000 crisis assistance co-responders to be deployed across the state in the cities and the rural areas and suburban areas. I asked for the design and funding of a system that looks at local county health clinics and other mental health facilities across the state to work with and create a program for those who are leaving incarceration for transitional health care, so that if they are undergoing mental health treatment in the prison system or the jails and they exit, they're not released from incarceration with perhaps 30 days of meds in their pockets, but no place to go, no place to get a prescription refill, no place to go to get a wellness check. Guess what? Nobody wants to be mentally ill. And if we are actually going to treat that problem, we have to look at a very big, glaring gap in the system. And that is, we just don't want to pay for it. We want to punish our way out of it. If you want more law enforcement on the streets, if you want more crisis assistance co-responders to go with law enforcement, which is 15 times more likely to reduce the risk of an officer pulling his or her firearm, if you want that, you have to pay for it. If you want to diagnose and treat those who are mentally ill, you're going to have to pay for it. If you want beds in psychiatric hospitals, you're going to have to pay for it. If you want ERs and our sheriff's departments to have capacity and be able to treat and diagnose and do those psych evals that this bill calls for, you're going to have to pay for it. So right now, we have the state's attention, and the state has ours. Let this not be the only step we take, because then it was just all lip service, smoke, and mirrors. Let this be the first of multiple steps that we take in the General Assembly to actually address the problem, which is to bring experts to the table. And when they give us proposed solutions, we agree to write the check. Because if we're not willing to pay for it, then it's the same old song and dance, and we're going to find ourselves back here again with yet another bill with yet another victim's name on it. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Wake, Representative Jones, rise?
Speak to the bill.
Gentleman's recognized to debate the motion.
First of all, I thought a long time about not speaking to this bill, but I felt that I had some unique qualifications to speak to it. I think I'm one of the few members in here who's been a prosecutor, a defense attorney, and a judge. I've seen the legal system from all three sides of the cocked hat. I look people in the eye who I've had to send to prison for a long, long time. And I have prosecuted people who've done horrible things, and fortunately, because the jury found them guilty, they were sent to prison for a long, long time. And right now, I'm a defense attorney. Some people hate defense attorneys till someone in their family needs one. And I wanted just to say a few things. I endorse a lot of what many of my colleagues say, but I'm going to tell a little small story about me personally, why we shouldn't make law when we're angry. I have two daughters, and they're now young women, but one of my daughters was going out with a guy, and he hit her. Only time it ever happened, ever, and all the dating and all of that. Hit her in the lip. And when I saw my daughter bleeding and hit in the lip, I got in my car and I drove in the direction of that boy's house. I didn't have a gun, just me. But I wanted to deal with the situation and him badly. But somebody, something, before I got to the boy's house, made me pull over. I think it was God. I think God said, hey, slow up, boy. Pull over, think. Think. And I pulled over and I thought. And I calmed down. I still went on over to the boy's house and asked him to talk to his parents and to bring him out. And I ended that relationship right at that boy's porch with his parents. Told him, don't you ever come near my daughter ever again. And that was that. But I say that for this reason. My grandmother used to say, be not quick to take offense, because anger is a forward sense. Gets in the way of your thinking. I wasn't thinking right that day. I was emoting. We need to step back off of this. I want to start with just three things. Don't speak to three things that have come up. First, I want to speak to the limitation on motions for appropriate relief. Now, I'm in this business. And sometimes guys come along years later, have been represented by lawyers, so forth, but something didn't get mentioned that should have been brought up when you study the law. The law is complex. I don't need to tell us that. We all know. We're sitting in here making laws. But put an artificial time limit on it, I don't think that's wise. I've handled MARs for guys being in for 8, 10, 12 years, 20 years, and raised points that never got raised. So that's important. That's point one. Point two, I already mentioned the emotional piece. And I think that when you step back off of things and think about them a little bit, you get time to marinate it, get all kinds of views. And this limitation on the MARs, I think we need to go through that a little more. I think we need to go through the mental health piece, and my colleagues have spoken very eloquently on the mental health piece. But we need to do it because we all live in bodies with a brain and our conscience, but if mental health is such a crucial issue, I spent 8 years on the mental health board here in Wake County. 8 years. And those 8 years helped inform me when I was a judge. I was on the mental health board before I was a judge. And I learned things about people. I learned things about how difficult it is to work on someone's mental health. It's hard working on physical health. We all know that. But mental health, a human being is a very complex entity. And those who are trained and those who have dealt with it need to deal with that piece. And I think that this study that's right here in the bill, page 12, says the North Carolina Collaboratory. I like that neat use of words. And we're going to put in a study to study the nexus between mental health and the justice system. Very good idea. Very good idea right here in the bill. But why not wait for the results of the study? We can wait. This isn't a problem. We're going to be working on the criminal justice system for as long as I'm here, I hope, and I hope well past when I'm gone from here. We're going to always be trying to make it better. And the mental health piece hurts. We were supposed to get a mental health center in my county, Wake, years ago. Didn't get it because it's a difficult area. When the human being's mental health goes, you lose something that the good Lord gave you that's extremely precious. Extremely precious. And so it would appear that a deranged person who had lost his mental health did something terribly horrible. And I'm hoping that assuming this bill does go through, that we set up something where we really put some serious, as my colleague said, serious money into it, because it needs money. It needs money to study it and figure out what are we going to do for these human beings who come through, who do these horrifically terrible things, and what can we do before they do them? Before they do them. So those are the points I would like to make here. I don't think there's any hurry. They're going to report back. I think they said something about next year, April. And the system of justice will take care of the situation in Charlotte and other places where bad things happen. Horrible events happened to Charlie Kirk. Terrible, awful. I heard it. Because I'm a man of faith, it almost made me cry. Because all the person was doing was saying his view, but it also stirred up other people who didn't agree with his view. And then a horrible thing happened. So when we start touching this stuff and emoting, we need to be careful and step back. Justice will be served. It will be served. And I believe when the time comes, justice will be served in that situation and the situation in Charlotte and all the way around. And so when we start changing our criminal laws, we should pause and think and discuss and study and then act. Thank you.
For what purpose does the lady from Mecklenburg, Representative Cunningham, rise?
To speak to the bill.
Ladies recognized to debate the motion.
First of all, I'm not trying to tell anybody how to vote on this bill. Let me make that clear. As we talk about the mental health situation, I'm going to go back in time a little bit. Representative Lambert's heard me tell the story, and some of the other people that we worked with in the mental health space have heard me tell the story. When my son was 14 years old, he had a break. I was in the last 6 weeks of nursing school at Gaston College. I had to beg, I said beg, for the mental health professional to come to the school and sit with us to have a conversation with my son. It was the principal, the assistant principal, the behavior specialist, myself, and the behavior therapist from mental health in Mecklenburg County. And as we began to have the conversation, they started to ask my son questions. And the first one was, are you thinking about hurting yourself? And he said no. The second question was, are you thinking about hurting someone else? And I was sitting right next to him, and he looked at me and said, yes. And they asked him, who? He said, her. And that her was me. My son, for the first time, was hospitalized 6 weeks in the mental health facility. The diagnosis was not correct in the first diagnosis. When I brought him home with behavior therapy in-home. Later on, he would become ill several other times, and he would have to be hospitalized. I went to the magistrate's office and asked for involuntary commitment for my son, and I was turned away. So I understand the difficulty in how to navigate a system that is complex and few average people understand. And believe me, I was a nurse then, and I did not know how to navigate that system. I'm saying this because I'm a mother of a child that has a mental health and an IDD diagnosis, that I have struggled to save his life and my life. I was told no guns in the house. Anything sharp in the house, take it out. Lock your doors. Secure yourself. And if I took him to the mental health facility and they said he answered the questions right, they were going to let him go. And if I told them I wasn't coming, they told me they would file charges for abandonment of my child. So the system is not simple. It's not simple at all. But I want to tell you, I'm not telling you what to do, but that's my child. And my child ain't no monster either. With all what's wrong with him, he's still my child, and I still love him. Now, what happened was horrendous. But you know what? That ain't the first time it's happened. It's happened before. We had a school teacher, her son killed her. Last week we had a 4-year-old boy killed, laying in his bed in his house. So it's something wrong. It's something going on in society. We are not in social norms right now, y'all. Everybody got a gun. People can't control themselves. We living in a totally different world today because nobody knows what a norm is anymore. It doesn't exist. Social norms don't exist. I can do what I want to do, and I can be angry at you. I can say what I want to say to you, and you can't do nothing about it, and I can do this to you. No, that ain't cool. No. But we have to take a step back because I want my colleagues to know I've been down here working for mental health. I've been working for mental health since I've been down here because I had a purpose. But the last biennial, we made an investment in mental health, IDD, and substance use. $835 million. Now we got to assess it. Yes, we was behind when we did it because we were already in a crisis. We've been in a crisis. That's not new. But we got to go back and assess what that $835 million is going to do. And I'm going to tell you something. Police officers are not trained medical professionals. Most people don't even know you can ask for a crisis intervention trained officer when you have a mental health crisis. You can do that. But we 600 down, I believe, in Mecklenburg County. Okay? So let's get real. This ain't going to solve it. This ain't going to fix it. We got a lot more work to do. And we got to be willing to do it. And we got to be willing to listen to each other. Because it ain't simple. And we got to stop throwing the blame around. I have a responsibility. I had a responsibility to myself and to my child and my community to do what I could to save a life and possibly save a stranger's life. But taking a life that you can't give is a whole nother ballgame. Taking a life that you can't give is a whole nother ballgame. So I'm not trying to take nobody's life. I was trained to save a life. I'm a nurse by profession, trained to save a life. Now, I'll help you transition if that's your choice. And if that's the family's choice. But I can't take your life. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the lady from Surrey, Representative Stevens,
To speak on the motion.
is recognized to debate the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I like Representative Jones, I wasn't necessarily going to speak on this, but a lot of things have been said that I felt like I needed to address. I will start with the death penalty. I appreciate all of the things that Representative Harrison said. However, since the time of her study group, we've changed a lot of things. If you are charged with capital murder and you are facing the death penalty, you get a very professional capital defender. People are getting a fair trial because they have experts in the death penalty who are handling their cases. We're talking about mental health, and thank you, Representative Cunningham, for taking responsibility with her son. It's when we don't have somebody taking responsibility, we still need to keep the community safe. Back in, and I wasn't here then, but in the early 2000s, I think when the Democrats were completely in charge of the General Assembly and the Governor's Mansion, over half of the mental health beds in North Carolina were done away with. They're gone. It's taking us time to get them back, and we are working on that slowly and surely. But in the meantime, we still have to protect the community against dangerous offenders, whatever the reason they're dangerous. The second thing, law enforcement and prosecutors and various other people were asked and did review this and gave us their suggestion, and changes were made. So we did deal with those people. The violent offenses, going to the bond issue, the violent offenses are going to have to be looked at more strenuously and more rigorously. And what this bill does is if you've got that violent past, you are presumed, and it's a rebuttable presumption, you are presumed to need something more, a secured bond and maybe house arrest, waiting for your trial. Then we talked about the Democrats being soft on crime. Well, I'm going to tell you that there's a task force for racial equity and criminal justice that's mentioned in here, doing away with that task force. This was something Governor Cooper set up, and Josh Stein and Anita Earls were the co-chairs of this committee. Welcome you to go look at their report. It's very extensive. And one of the big things that they had was issues with bond, that there shouldn't be bond, that people should be free pending their trials for whatever reason. And various people who've read that report went out and started acting on it. That happened a lot in Mecklenburg County. So I'm going to share a story with you about Mecklenburg County. My sister lives in Cabarrus County, next door. And one night, her house got broken into and several of her neighbors in Cabarrus County. Once they got into looking a little deeper, the same people who broke in her house stole a car in Mecklenburg County, assaulted the person with intent to kill that they stole the car from, and then they fled to Cabarrus County to commit these offenses, and then they went into South Carolina and ran into a liquor store and robbed it. Mecklenburg County, where there was an attempt to kill with this car, they were given a $4,000 unsecured bond. In Cabarrus County, it was $400,000 for breaking into the houses with people in them at night. So it was a very, very different bonding situation. The bonds were not being consistent. We've seen Mecklenburg County repeatedly turn out violent offenders, and we've seen it in the news stories. There was a man who assaulted a woman, and so there's a 50B order and apparently some serious injury. They let him go, and within 24 hours of letting him go, he had the woman again and was strangling her, planning to kill her because he had been let go on bond. Not even the 48 hours we typically hold a domestic violence person. There's some serious problems, and we needed to put some structure on this. If we have magistrates who are doing the bonding that the soft on crime area is doing, we got problems. Because a bond is not just to ensure that you're going to appear in court. It's to ensure that the community is going to be safe. And you look at these prior records in order to determine the possible threats, the possible danger to society. And somewhere along the way, some of these magistrates have forgotten that. So we need to give stronger, stricter rules for them, particularly when violent offenses occur. So I'd ask for your support on this bill.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Wake, Representative Rubin, arise?
To speak to the motion.
The gentleman is recognized to debate the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I spent most of my career as an assistant United States attorney, a federal prosecutor here in Raleigh, and while I did that job, I specialized in dealing with sentencing issues for recidivist, violent, and drug offenders. So a lot of things I came into the legislature I had to learn, but I feel like this is kind of exactly what I did for most of my career. And, I agree with one thing. We all watched the video of this heinous crime. I know we did. And I feel like if I closed my eyes, I could probably watch it again right now, and that'll always be true. And it was heinous. It was unforgivable. And it made me as angry as I've heard the anger coming from other folks in the room. And anger is not always a bad thing, because it can lead to resolve. And it can lead, in the case of our values, to justice. And hopefully not to revenge for revenge's sake, but to justice and to make a society that is better. And I'll tell you, when I was a federal prosecutor, when someone is either convicted or they plead guilty and you're getting ready to sentence them, the court prepares this thing called a pre-sentence investigation report. And it details everything that happened with the crime and how you calculate the sentence, but it also gives you basically the biography of their entire life. It goes from how they grew up. Did they grow up in a broken home? Did they get education? What kind of jobs did they do? Did they work a job ever? And you read a lot of these, hundreds and hundreds of them over the years, and you start to realize something as a prosecutor, which is that, justice and public safety, the prosecutor's the last stop, not the first stop. And when you see the history of a lot of the folks that we're locking up for incredibly long sentences, that is the culmination of a failure by them. And as you look a long way back, we might be honest with ourselves and say it's a failure about society. That we have a pattern of folks who are suffering from mental illness, who are suffering from extreme poverty, things most people, not everyone, but most people in this room didn't grow up with. I say that not from a perspective of mercy. We were still going to go into that courtroom and we were going to go for a very serious sentence for a very serious crime. I am not saying that to ask for sympathy. I am saying that to say that if you are actually serious about public safety in North Carolina, then you will look at that whole pipeline. It is the only way. Because the fact is, if you prevent someone from going down that pathway, you've done something great for them, and maybe they'll be a productive member of society, but you've also made sure that victim never becomes a victim. And so this is why I struggle with this bill, because I heard the statement earlier to stop focusing on the criminal and focus on the victim, but if we don't start focusing more on the criminal, we're just going to have more victims. And that is what this bill does. And I'm so disappointed because there are things that I like in this bill. I think we should be detaining people who we think predict would have violent actions if we let them out pretrial. That's what the federal system does. We should have a system like that in North Carolina. And frankly, if we think you're likely to commit violence while you're out pretrial, I don't care how much bond you can post, because how much money you have is actually not the question. And you might be interested to know, despite all of the federal things about end cashless bail, the federal system is cashless. Because the question is, can this person be released with conditions that ensure they're not going to hurt anyone and that they're going to come back? And if the answer is no, they don't get released. Bond, how much you can pay, it's kind of off to the side of that question. And we shouldn't get lured into some political fight about bail and cash and whatever. We should be saying, if someone's going to hurt their community, they should be locked up. If there's a way to release them pre-trial that won't hurt their community, we should do that. That's the right approach to it. And so there are parts of this bill I like. We should be locking up violent offenders pre-trial. There should at least be a presumption of that. But again, as Representative Budd talked about, where I read this bill, and to be very candid, I decided it wasn't a serious endeavor, was the fact it doesn't have the money. You are drastically increasing the number of people that we will detain. That will cause huge costs to our jails, and in turn, that will actually cause huge costs to our prisons, because our jails are currently holding a lot of people because our prisons are so underfunded that they can't use all their beds. Now, my answer to that isn't don't do the detention thing. I just explained my view on that. My answer is, where's the money for that? And we should fund that instead of passing yet another massive expense down to our counties and then wondering why they raise their property taxes. But the jails are already overburdened. The prisons are already overburdened. And in case you're not paying attention to the crisis in our prisons, it's pretty bad. Right now, we have the lowest pay in the region for correctional officers. It's lower than every other state around us. It's also lower than every sheriff's office, which means if you're a correctional officer, working for the state is actually the least paying version of that job that you could possibly have. So it should be no surprise we have a vacancy issue. I heard the other day they go to job seminars, but they were not allowed to go to one in Buncombe because the job didn't pay enough. Chick-fil-A could go, but the Department of Adult Corrections couldn't go. These are the people that we're asking to keep people safe. And why am I talking about prisons in a jail detention bill? I am talking about that because if we want to address this problem, you've heard from so many people about mental health, and this bill does nothing to seriously address mental health. You have to have mental health intervention, and our prisons are part of that, but they're overfull. If you really want to address violent crime, you have to address recidivism, but right now, if you talk to our Department of Adult Corrections, what they'll tell you is we are so understaffed and so underfunded that we have cut all programming to rehabilitate people because we have to just put everything into keeping it safe. And if we could get to a place where we actually rehabilitate some of the folks that we release into society, one, you make us safer in North Carolina, which is, I think, what we're all saying we want. And two, you'll actually save the money. It's just one of these things where this legislature's failure to fund something properly has actually cost the taxpayers more money. Because every time someone gets out and they commit another crime, because they spent their time in prison becoming a better criminal instead of a better person, you've got a new victim, you have a new prosecution, you have a new trial, you have a new round of time in the prison, and for what? For something we could have prevented. And again, this bill does nothing about that either. And so, I mean, this is how bad it is in the prisons, by the way. They're so underfunded that they can't fix the fire suppression systems, so we're having to pay personnel to do fire watch. You know what fire watch is? You have a guy walk around and look for fire because you can't afford to fix your fire suppression. That is the level of underfunding this body. And, you know, I will say, I normally would sort of shy away from being this blunt about it, but, you know, I'm hearing the soft on crime Democrats. I watched that press conference. I watched pro-crime, which is just an outrageous and uncivil thing to say. And so let's be clear about this. Republicans have controlled the General Assembly for 15 years. Every bit of this is on you. You can fix it too, because you have that power. And so instead of saying that as a blame game, let's take it as a responsibility. 15 years of underfunded prisons, 15 years of cuts to mental health, 15 years of cuts to public safety, and yeah, the cracks are showing. So this is an opportunity, if we can drop that language like pro-crime, because no one in here is pro-crime, to work together on a better bill. I would see that as a bill that actually funds mental health beds. Right now, we're going to detain more folks for mental health treatment, but we're already short on beds, so where are they going to go realistically? We don't have an answer to that. It would expand our jails if we're going to detain more people, and it would pay the counties to do that. It would fund our prison system properly. It would have trained mental health officers so that there is not a shortage, so you actually can get one. And it would get us to a rate of having, I believe the right ratio is 1 ADA for every 10,000 people, and practically none of our counties meet that ratio today. And of course, you need public defenders equal to that challenge. So I'm disappointed in the rhetoric that has gone on when the fact is that this is a bill being offered, and this is a bill that could have been offered 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago. But there's a chance for us to work together and all put our rhetoric down and write a better version of this bill. And so that's why I'm a no on this today. It's not because I don't like everything in it. There are things that I think are great in it. I think we could refine our detention process, but we have to do it in a serious way. And the last thing I'll add is a serious way involves the public. I had no doubt you consulted some law enforcement professionals while you were writing this bill, but I can't help but point out that the bill was released to the public 1 day before the Senate voted on it, 2 days before we did. That's the Shrimpgate thing, over and over and over and over, legislating in secret. Why don't we just have a bill that we had put out today to go to committee and spend a month, spend 2 months, get the feedback, get the controversy, and come out with a bill together? So, from my experience, this bill is not going to solve our problem, and in some ways it's going to make our prison crisis worse and our jail crisis worse. But I think that there's hope that what's in here could be expanded on and funded properly, and we could work together on that. But I'm not going to stand here and act like we haven't been putting forward a lot of those proposals for years, whether that's mental health funding, better paying our officers. We've been putting those proposals forward for years. And so I'd like to be listened to on those things, and I would encourage us to work together on it. Thank you.
For what purpose, the lady from Durham, Representative Austin, rise?
To debate the motion.
Ladies recognized to debate the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to speak briefly and emphasize a few points about the methods of execution provision of the bill. So to a person, everyone that I've mentioned this provision to has really kind of stopped in their tracks at the idea that we would reintroduce electrocution as an execution method, which is something we haven't used in this state in nearly 100 years. And that we'd add the firing squad as a potential option as a method of execution here at home in North Carolina. And, I feel like, unfortunately, it's hard to shock people these days. It's certainly hard to shock people here in this building, but their reactions have been entirely justified because, frankly, no matter what you think about the death penalty more generally, there's just no question that these methods are risky and have the potential to be extremely gruesome. Something we've seen play out in other states, as one of my colleagues outlined earlier. I'd say also folks are shocked because, again, kind of regardless of your political affiliation or ideology, I think folks are concerned that any effort to speed up executions could jeopardize the lives of innocent people. Now, I share that not as a statistic, but as something I know from my own experience. I've seen this state escape that kind of horrific outcome firsthand. About 10 years ago, I represented one of the folks that my colleague mentioned who was exonerated from North Carolina's death row because he was innocent. Governor McCrory, a Republican governor, gave him a pardon of innocence following his exoneration. It was the only pardon that he issued during his administration. That case taught me and a lot of other people a lot of things. I think first that protecting the innocent, as was mentioned earlier, is not a Republican issue and it's not a Democrat issue. It's not a partisan issue, it's a human one. But I think the most powerful lesson that I learned was that the likelihood that we've made a mistake as a state, the likelihood that we've executed an innocent person in the past and could in the future is real, and it's irreversible. Those kinds of mistakes will become the reality for everyone here in this chamber if we do things like authorize these barbaric methods of execution to take another person's life. And I hope that none of us want to be a part of that. Thank you.
For what purpose, the lady from Orange, Representative Price, rise.
To debate the bill.
Ladies recognized to debate the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I want to say I'm not speaking to you as an attorney. I'm one that has never studied, well, I studied a little bit of law, but I'm not coming to you with that. But I am daughter of law enforcement. My father was on the police force for 38 years, so I do respect law enforcement, and I'm not soft on crime. I want to talk about the mental health issue. I appreciate the consideration of mental health and mental illness in this bill, and seeing the need for coordination between law enforcement, the judiciary, and mental health professionals. In fact, Mr. Speaker, when you asked for suggestions for the bill, I submitted, along with my colleagues, a suggestion that the state support initiatives that aim to reduce the number of people with a mental illness in our detention centers and prisons through coordinated efforts. Yet, the bill seems to give more focus to detaining and criminalizing mental illness, when instead, these people need treatment rather than incarceration. And by the way, when someone suffers from a mental illness, name calling, for example, calling someone a monster, is totally inappropriate. The act may be monstrous, but the individual is not. The act indeed, as I said, was heinous, but the perpetrator has a mental illness. About a decade ago, the National Association of Counties, or NACO, promoted the Stepping Up initiative, and across the nation, counties embarked on programs to treat people before an injury or a fatality occurs. This has been a bipartisan effort, and with the assistance of the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, counties in North Carolina have adopted aspects of Stepping Up. So the work that's outlined in the collaboratory, that we've outlined for the collaboratory, already is in progress. What is needed, as has been said numerous times, is more funding for mental health, behavioral health, and mental illness. This bill falls short in appropriating sufficient funds to address the issue. A second matter that has come to my attention is the provision to consider a person's housing situation when deciding whether to release a person if a person is homeless. Under this law, he or she could be detained or held in detention. But until when? Quite often, persons experiencing a mental illness is homeless because they are unable to hold a job or afford the rent, and therefore afford rent for a home. So how long would this person be detained? This provision very well could result in our detention centers now becoming the recourse for people who are unhoused. Therefore, we would be criminalizing homelessness along with mental illness. Now, I did run this bill, I had a discussion with clerks of court in my district. And in my discussions, in their points of view, the provisions would cause significant backlogs or delays in processing. This would mean the overcrowding of our detention centers. In addition, regarding the requirement for judicial officials to have access to the clerk's IVC files, I have been told that the bulk of those records do not exist in Odyssey. They are confidential records kept in a manual index in respective clerk's offices. A concern is that if a defendant is arrested on a violent crime in which the official determining pretrial release conditions would need access to the IVC records, a defendant would have to be detained in a local jail until the clerk's office would reopen. And that could be over a weekend. So to shore up those records and get them into Odyssey would require the clerks to spend hours upon hours adding the information for these cases. And again, that would require money, funding. So I just want to say again, in sum, because most of what I've said has been said before, we need to invest more in mental health and treating people with mental illness in order to prevent unintended injuries and fatalities. Waiting until after the crime and inflicting greater penalties will do nothing to bring back a person's life. Thank you.
What purpose to the lady from Mecklenburg? Representative Logan, arise.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Please recognize to debate the motion.
I went over the bill, and what I found is that, and I want to say I'm not soft on crime either, I found that it didn't say much about what I'd been hearing in the media about law enforcement. There's not a lot, nothing in here about law enforcement, as a matter of fact. And it's not very strong, as we've heard, on mental health. I made some suggestions about law enforcement, and let me say, although you've heard from a lot of my colleagues here who are attorneys and nurses, the difference for me, being law enforcement, I patrolled Mecklenburg County. I love Charlotte, and I worked the streets of Charlotte alone in a patrol car. And I patrolled, when I got to Charlotte, what the highway patrol, what they do now is they work the interstate, which is a large interstate system. I-485 itself is over 60 miles. I worked the county of Mecklenburg. So sometime I was getting calls as soon as, or before I could check on to respond to incidents in Mecklenburg County. Charlotte is not a town. Charlotte is a major metropolitan city. It's always had its issues, and it's always been a handful. And I've always was hit the street sometime running as soon as my feet hit the ground. But Charlotte is not out of control. It was not out of control when I got there, and it's not out of control now. It just needs a little tender care. It's very tragic what happened in Charlotte on the Lynx line. I'm very familiar with the Lynx. My best friend, my neighbor, was an engineer for Lynx. She also drove cats. And I rode Lynx several times with her. When I was off and didn't have anything else to do, I'd jump on the Lynx train. I heard my colleague back there talk about just go and do your thing. I don't operate like that. I always do the what if. Anywhere that I go, there's always a possibility that something could happen. I teach classes. When you leave home, you may not get back home. That's how I live. And probably some of my colleagues who's been in law enforcement, they live the same way, especially if you leave in a motor vehicle. There's no guarantee that you'll ever get back home if you leave home in a motor vehicle. So that's how I live. I make ways to keep myself secure. So I talk to people and some colleagues, what can we do to help deter some problems? And they're not major problems, and you don't want people to be afraid when they go out. I spent a lot of my childhood in New York City, subway system. People are pushed down in front of subways in New York. You know, they have that big electrical track, and that's not good. They have law enforcement officers, Port Authority. They constantly walk through the subway train. That's something we probably could do with the Lynx. It would take 2 officers to walk that train back and forth. You want partners. There's 35 Lynx trains that run every day in Charlotte. So 24 hours, 35 trains. That would take a lot of law enforcement officers. Charlotte can't do it. CMPD does not have the manpower. I thought, what about K9s? Can we put K9 on the platforms? K9s in the trains. They have 20 K9s, 11 are assigned to the airport. That's not going to be enough. It takes $10,000 to $20,000 to buy and train K9s. That's going to cost money. We can enhance lighting at night. Charlotte's a major city, but it's dark. We can enhance lighting in the downtown area, around the platform, inside the trains. That could help. It's going to cost money. Another thing we could do, they will allow city, county, state, and federal off-duty officers to work. I introduced a bill that would allow Highway Patrol to work off-duty. It didn't see the light of day. We can't afford to give them a decent raise. Why not allow them to work off-duty? They pay $70 an hour for off-duty work. That would be pretty good. They're leaving Charlotte. Huntersville Police Department pays $72,000 a year, starting pay. That would be good work for them. You had a bill, Back to Blue. I was ready to support that. I'll support anything for law enforcement, but it didn't come up today. The $1,500 bonuses that you were going to give would be good, but it's one time. The increases that you were going to give, I introduced a bill in April that offered more than was in that bill. Didn't see the light of day. I introduced bills each time that I've been here asking for additional magistrates for Mecklenburg County. Did not see the light of day. I'm not soft on crime. Law enforcement is my legacy. It's who I am. It's what I believe in. But we've been bad-mouthed and talked about. I don't like what happened in Charlotte. I don't like being targeted and talked about. And people talk about what I put my life on the line to do. I am who I am. And I'm going to support the law enforcement officers out there who are trying to make North Carolina and Charlotte a better place. And they need training, and they need equipment, and they need money to do the job that they need to do. And so I ask this General Assembly to put your money where your mouth is and support law enforcement that you say you support, that I've told you before that I don't see happening. And let's make North Carolina a better place together. Thank you.
Well, purpose, the lady from Mecklenburg, Representative Helfer, rise.
To speak to the motion.
Please recognize to debate the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in the same capacity and bearing the same responsibility that I carry every single time I step into this chamber and take a seat at this desk. That is on behalf of the people of North Mecklenburg County, the people of Davidson, Cornelius, and Huntersville. And on August 22nd, my constituents lost a friend, a neighbor, a niece, a sister, and a daughter. Because when Iryna Zarutska made the impossible decision to leave her home in Kiev 3 years ago, she made a new home in Huntersville, North Carolina. When I spoke with Iryna's family, I heard 3 requests, and so I made them 3 promises. The first promise I made, take swift and meaningful action. We are here today taking swift action. But as my colleagues have made clear, we have so much more work to do to make sure that our actions are as meaningful as possible. I ask each of you in joining me in a commitment to keep going, to heed the insight from experts in the criminal justice and mental health care professions, to consider public safety from all angles and recognize that, yes, investing, paying up, using tax dollars wisely in preventative solutions, adequate staffing, and comprehensive systems is arguably the most important work of this body. I promised Iryna's family that I would take swift, meaningful action, so I am here today, ready to do so. And I hope to keep showing up with the opportunity to vote yes on the many bills and funding requests that my colleagues have filed and highlighted this afternoon. The second promise, to stop posting and sharing the security footage from the light rail incident and her terrifying final moments. I ask each of us to consider when, how, and in what capacity we use her name, her likeness, and her death. At the center of this debate is a person and a family who have experienced the unimaginable. May their unfathomable loss inspire us to meaningful action and not to political warfare. The third promise, to learn more about the beautiful life she lived. Theoden James of the Charlotte Observer sat down with Iryna's family and wrote a beautiful piece about her 3 years here in the United States. And I ask and encourage each of you to read that piece and to share it. And as we move forward, seriously committed to serious responses to public safety, I invite you to imagine Iryna as her family and those who loved her might, cooking borscht in the kitchen, studying for her English classes at Rowan Cabarrus Community College, walking the dogs or biking along the Greenway or to and from work, sketching in her journal, saving up for a vintage Cadillac, commuting to and from her new apartment in the artsy, bustling Nodon neighborhood of Charlotte, making friends wherever she went, and most of all, dreaming of a bright and wide and limitless future. We can all be devastated and furious that that future was taken from her. And we can also all work earnestly, seriously, and together to build a North Carolina that does keep all of our young people and their dreams safe. Thank you.
For what purpose? The gentleman from Orange, Representative Wanzi, arise.
To debate the motion.
The gentleman's recognized to debate the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, a lot of what's been said by my colleagues has been needed to be said. And I cannot imagine the pain, the grief, and what the family must be dealing with and coping with right now. There was something that a colleague said about something that happened in his life with his child, and can't help but think about my own children and the kind of state of mind that I'd have if something horrible happened. I don't know what I'd do. I would see red. I would want punishment. I would want revenge, anything to make sure that whoever did the act paid for it. I'm also a lawyer, and one thing that I swore to do was to uphold the law. And I believe in a system in which we hold people accountable and responsible. We are a nation of laws. And so even if I were in that state of mind, I am thankful to live in a country where we have a system to hold people accountable. And like my colleagues have said, we've got a pretty important and critical responsibility as state lawmakers to make sure that the decisions we're making, the laws that we're making, are fair, and to make sure that we aren't seeing red when we make laws. And so I just implore upon all of us to be thoughtful here. That's what Iryna deserves. That's what all of our North Carolinians deserve. Full funding, full support, of course, for our mental health resources, full funding for our law enforcement, full funding for our courts. These entities, they all need more from the General Assembly. Let's go about the business of giving that to them. Thank you.
What purpose? The gentleman from Chatham, Representative Reeves, rise.
To speak on the motion.
Gentleman is recognized to debate the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And for those who are wondering, I'm it, so everybody can relax. We'll go on and get you voted and get you out of here. This is a tough bill. It's a tough discussion. And let me tell you why it's a tough discussion. I've had a chance to talk to a whole lot of people. I have talked to probably more people than I care to talk to about this bill. Here's what's disappointing. And this is what, when I talk to several people, this is kind of what I was bringing up. And, you know, and I know there's nobody in here, but my concern about the changes that were made in this bill and about the direction that we've gone on this felt like we were getting a little political. Because here's the bottom line. I don't know a person in here who thinks this man should have been out on the street. I mean, that's just it. There's nobody in here that thinks that. And like, it's kind of wild when you hear people talk because it's a truth. I mean, we're just not in a position where we're thinking that. And so I think the insinuation, especially for somebody, this is the work I've done for 30 years. When you hear people say that, it's frustrating. Here are the uncontroverted facts. A schizophrenic in crisis committed a heinous murder. Fact. The criminal justice system as a system probably could not have done much more than it did with what we've provided it. That's a fact. Fact. To bring this up doesn't mean anything about your position on crime. It is amazing to me because we're going to do a bill a little bit later about political violence. It is amazing to me that there is anybody in here who can look at some of us, and I'll just speak for me. I want as many people who are dangerous off the street as I can get because I feel particularly endangered, if I am candid. So I do everything I can to support police, to support strict penalties. We just had a principal killed in Roseville. And there are things the criminal justice system could have done to prevent that. But what I saw that was just sent to me was something on the NCGOP website, House GOP website, that says, Democrats are getting ready to vote no because they're soft on crime. Just as we just tried to say in here that that's not what this was about. And let me tell you why that bothers me. Because I can empathize so much with the family. And when I tell you my heart goes out to that family, again, doing this for 30 years, there is nothing worse for that family than what they're going through right now. Iryna's family is going through something that nobody should have to go through. But what I'm not going to do is to start pointing fingers and blaming anybody for what's happened. We've had one-party control in this state for the last 15 years. We are way past the time where we can say, well, if not for this other party that's not in control, all these things could have been fixed. What we know is schizophrenia is a real thing. This isn't some made up legal term. This isn't some, oh, that's just something somebody's saying trying to get out of something. If you've not known somebody with schizophrenia, it is horrifying and it is frightening because they go completely somewhere else. I represented a 16-year-old, and luckily all he did was steal a car. I couldn't get the case done for a long time because I couldn't even get him to talk to his parents because he says parents are aliens and they're trying to steal him and he's not going to talk to these people. To this day, he can't tell you how he got from South Carolina to North Carolina. And 25 years ago, I had somewhere I could have sent that kid that would have kept him off the street, kept people safe, but at the same time figure out how to make sure when he got back on the street that people still stay safe. And that's what we should be about. The question isn't who can be toughest on crime. The question isn't who can puff their chest out and say, I'm here for the family, because you know who we're not talking about is the family. You know what I know? I know they don't want to be in the commercial that's already been prepared on Roy Cooper about this murder. I know that they don't want either party saying the other party is at fault for their daughter dying, because what they know is their daughter is gone. And it's just like with COVID, I'm still naive enough. I saw a pastor say once, recently, this year, in a book, he said that empathy is a sin. And I'm just going to have to respectfully disagree with him about where my faith takes me on empathy. And when I tell you I empathize, that's probably, in my mind, my biggest flaw. Because I can easily look and see and hurt for somebody. And so like with COVID, I hope this is going to be a time we all come together. It doesn't become political. We're going to come up with something that works. And with this murder, this was such an opportunity for us. Such an opportunity for us to come together, have some real good thoughts, because I talked to Republican law enforcement, Democratic law enforcement, Republican legislators, Democratic legislators, Republican judges, Democratic judges. Heck, the person who was the elected DA in Mecklenburg when all this was going on is now a U.S. attorney, and he was a Republican, and I don't blame him because he can't fix the mental health system. So when I hear all this discussion, I'm thinking as a father, because I heard somebody talk earlier about being a father and how you look at things different. As a father, I'm sitting here thinking, does this make my daughter safe? No. And my goodness, changes to the death penalty in a bill that is allegedly about trying to help the problems that fix this is cynical in ways that hurt me. It makes me wonder who we are as a government. Do you know how cynical you have to be to try to decide, here's my chance to stick in all these things I've been wanting to stick in anyway about the criminal justice system? This bill should be about one thing. What is every effort we can do to make not just this young woman have felt safe and be safe, but everybody feel safe and be safe? Because there's the perception of safety, and then there's actually being safe. And sometimes those two aren't joined. And in order for people to have been safe in this situation, police officers, as they have told you, as sheriffs have told you, Republican and Democratic, need help with what to do with mental health patients. They don't need them sitting in their jails. That doesn't help anybody. They need mental health hospital beds, if not full hospitals. They need more people that can treat these people. We do such a disservice to people who are in law enforcement and to people who do mental health treatment and things of that sort, because we take the position, you guys ought to do it for the love of the game. It ought to be your love that motivates you. They got bills to pay too. But there's nothing in here that's raising wages for law enforcement, some of the lowest paid people when it comes down to county and state employees. There's nothing in here that builds one mental health hospital. There's nothing in here that reserves one mental health bed to make sure that these folks get somewhere and stay there. We all agree, get them off the streets, but don't make other people end up collateral damage. which is where we're headed. This isn't about feeling sorry for people. This isn't about the kindness and all that kind of stuff. I can promise you this. I know that was said earlier. Promise you, you guys have beaten out of me the thought that I'm going to get somebody to believe that we should do something because it's the kind thing to do. I'm not making that argument to you, because that argument falls on deaf ears, because we all have failings as humans. And as humans, it becomes so hard sometimes when we can't see ourselves in a place to feel bad for somebody in that place, because we struggle with empathy. But what I can tell you is I have seen this story play out over and over and over and over again. And I don't know why we dismantled this system. And I will remind you all that, again, when we talk about what Democrats did 20 years ago, a whole lot of people, not necessarily in this room, but there were a whole lot of people that are in your party now that used to be Democrats. Don't believe me? Go look up the registration. People change parties all the time depending on who's in power. That's just a truth. So it's not about Democrats made mistakes, and it's not about, I'm saying Republicans have made mistakes in the last 15 years. What I'm saying is, unfortunately, issues like this have to happen before we address it. But to address this is not to put an issue like the death penalty in divisively. To address this is not to just float a bill out in a week and then hope everybody's got a chance to do something with it. It's just so mean. Just mean-spirited at this point, and I don't know why. Because this is an easy one. This is a layup. When we tell people that we want to show them examples of how we work together, this was a layup. And you know how I know we can pass clean bills? Because that's all we've been doing in the House. And this bill came from the Senate, so I know that all the muddying came from the Senate. I know this isn't the bill the House would have passed. I know because I talked to you. I know this isn't the bill we would have passed. And I know that saying today, show the Senate something and send this back, clean up some of this language, and we're happy to all vote, so this can be 120-0. I know that falls on deaf ears because I know that this is part of a whole lot of different stuff. But that's unfortunate because I believe the family deserves better. And I'm not chastising, I'm not preaching. I am speaking from the heart because I am just frustrated. Because here's a good thing about being minority leader. I've been cussed out by everybody that could cuss me out on this issue. Every single person that has talked to me on this issue told me I don't know what the hell I'm talking about and I ought to take a different position. So when I walk out of here, the only person I can guarantee you everybody's going to be pissed off with is me. But you know what? We all helped get us to that place. We all helped us get to a place where we can't have a decent conversation about the loss of life of one of our citizens. Because you can't say we didn't try. My goodness, I think you got more letters from our side of the aisle on this issue than probably anything else, because people were so hopeful that we could work together on this. And I still know that there are plans going forward that will work on this. And one of the plans I will have is legislation that gets these death penalty parts back to where they were. Coming up with barbaric ways to kill people doesn't suddenly solve the problem. No schizophrenic is going to change their mind because instead of lethal injection, they're facing a firing squad. That's ludicrous when you say it out loud. What that is giving people an illusion about how things get changed. You want change, do things that give meaningful change. Put your money where your mouth is. We have got the money to fix this mental health system. We've got the ability. We've got all the facts that we need. This is a layup. But instead, I get tweets from the House GOP account telling me what my position is on crime, which again is just, it's offensive. When I hear the position that certain people decide I have because of my party, which is really weird, on faith and on crime, it is amazing. Because I feel confident that I've got the trust of more law enforcement people that I know personally than just about anybody in this room, and not because I'm great or better, but because I listen to them. Even if we don't disagree, I listen to them and I say, what is it you feel you need? What can I do to make you better at your job and make my folks safer? And I would leave it at this when you talk about the criminal justice system. I could give you story after story about how broken this system is right now. But when you talk about, well, this is going to solve the problem, here's what you run into. Never forget this. We had a bunch of breaking and enterers going in the most prominent neighborhood in our town. Just, people were ready. They had the pitchforks out. They were ready to go. They said, you get these guys and you throw them in prison, and I don't want any of this stuff to happen or anything like that. And lo and behold, the guys that were doing the breaking in were kids that lived in that neighborhood. I got 100 calls saying, man, y'all got to figure out what to do about these poor kids. They're really good kids. They don't mean any harm. Why are y'all pressing charges? Why are you being so mean? My point is, we make laws to fit everybody, every situation, and everything. And as we always do, telling judges who are elected just like us, telling prosecutors who are elected just like us, and telling all these people they don't know what they're doing because something happened that we feel we could have prevented. I am telling you, if you know anything about crime, you can't prevent, but you can mitigate. And mitigation could have happened today. But today what we have done is we have shown just how cynical we are. Because if I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong. If we don't have tweets going out here talking about people being soft on crime, if there's not a commercial that pops out against some Democrat saying this incident shows that they're bad people, then I'll be happy to. Well, I can't eat the mic, but I'll find something I can eat that bothers everybody and makes you feel like you paid back. But I know that's what this is going to be, and I really feel like that's why this bill came out of the Senate the way it did. And I really wish we stop endorsing it because the House has been better than this all session. We're going to pass a Medicaid bill today that is a clean bill because we have dedicated ourselves as a body, Democrat and Republican, to fixing problems. But in this, we are failing to fix a problem. We are exacerbating the issues that cause us to have to pass the political violence bill. This is it right here. This is why this stuff happens. Because we have told people that there are only two sides, and there are not two sides. There are 11 million sides in North Carolina. Because there's nobody that's just like the other person. There's nobody that agrees with somebody on 100% of the issues. But what makes us great, what made us different from every country in history, what has made us different from a lot of states in this country, the reason we are successful is because we talk, we communicate, we listen to people. We don't figure out how to demonize them. And it burns me up that we're doing this today on something this serious. Because yes, I'm a father of a daughter. Amos is a father of a daughter. I remember watching my daughter run when we were in New Orleans, when a homeless man started following us, scared to death. And all I can think of as a government, we could fix that, but we choose not to because it allows us to keep demonizing somebody else. Stop demonizing, and I'm going to say the bad word, start loving. Start thinking that at least the people who serve in here with you care about these same issues and we can all work together. And we can come up with solutions. So again, this battle may be lost. I hope the war isn't. But I really, really wish we had done this better.
Question before the House is the motion to concur with Senate Committee Substitute Number 2 to House Bill 307. All those in favor will vote aye. All those opposed will vote no. The clerk will open the vote. Representative Gillespie, Representative White, the members wish to be recorded. Clerk will lock the machine and record the vote, 82 having voted in the affirmative and 30 in the negative. The motion to concur to the Senate Committee Substitute Number 2 to House Bill 307 having passed, be ordered sent to the governor via special messenger. And ordered and rolled. Members, we're going to go ahead and take up the bill down towards the bottom of your calendar, House Bill, strike that, Senate Bill 13, Political Terrorism Prevention Act. Mr. Clerk, Senate Bill 13, the clerk will read.
Senator Johnson, Senate Bill 13, a bill to be entitled an act to enhance criminal penalties for politically motivated acts of violence. The General Assembly of North Carolina enacts.
Gentleman from Columbus, Representative Jones is recognized to debate the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'm not here today to tiptoe around the truth or water down my words to make anyone feel comfortable. We've reached a point in this country where people don't just lose their jobs over politics, they lose their lives. It's not an exaggeration, it's not rhetoric, it's a reality, and this bill is our response. The Political Terrorism Prevention Act isn't a suggestion, it's not a symbolic gesture. It's a warning, a line drawn in concrete that politically motivated violence will not be tolerated in North Carolina, period. We're not talking about spirited debate, we're not talking about protest, we're talking about violence, real, deliberate, targeted violence. Let's look at the facts. Steve Scalise was shot for being a Republican. Justice Kavanaugh nearly assassinated. President Trump shot on stage in his head. Governor Shapiro's residence was firebombed. Minnesota legislator Melissa Hortman gunned down. And now, Charlie Kirk, a young man who made it his life's work to encourage political engagement, free speech, and using his voice for spreading the gospel. It's not chaos. This is not coincidence. It's a pattern. It's been ignored for far too long. This bill finally meets that pattern with consequences. It says if you attack someone for their politics, that is political terrorism. It is now an aggravated factor in the sentencing. It's death penalty eligible in the fact that results in murder. There's no parole, no soft landing, no early release for those who kill the silent speech. You commit political violence in this state, you will not walk free again. Let me be clear, this is our turning point. This is where we decide if we're going to defend the right to speak or surrender it to fear. This is where we choose whether the courtroom protects democracy or whether the streets get to decide who is allowed to talk. Now, if you vote no, you're telling the radicals out there that violence works. You're telling the next assassin that the risk is worth it. You're telling the next grieving family that their son or daughter's life didn't justify a stronger sentence. Not us, not this chamber, not this state. We will not let what happened to Charlie Kirk or Steve Scalise, Melissa Hartman, President Trump to become the new normal. We still believe in free speech. We still believe in powerful debate. And we still believe that if you try to kill someone for those beliefs, you deserve the full weight of justice, nothing less. So let's take this moment where we say once and for all, political violence ends here. This is our turning point, and we should not turn back. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
What purpose? The gentleman from Onslow, Representative Gable, will rise.
To debate the bill.
Gentleman's recognized to debate the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House, I rise today in strong support of the Political Terrorism Prevention Act. I rise not only as a representative, but the youngest member of this General Assembly, and as someone who has seen firsthand how political disagreements can turn into political violence. For me, this issue is personal. Like so many young conservatives, I was inspired today and in years past to get involved in public service because of Charlie Kirk. Because of Charlie, I've met many of my great and best friends, 2 of my college roommates, and I feel I sit here with you. Hopefully some of you like me. If not, that's okay. But I sit here, I feel, because of Charlie and what he created. He created an organization that I was able to be a part of. I was able to learn. I was able to grow. I was able to network, and I feel it is why I'm here today. Charlie's assassination was not just an attack on a man, it was an attack on free speech that every member of this General Assembly holds dear. This is why this bill matters. This legislation makes it absolutely clear if you commit a crime to silence someone's political beliefs, North Carolina will hold you accountable. If you commit a felony motivated by political terrorism, your sentence will be raised 1 full class higher. If you commit a crime based on politics, there will be no parole, no early release, no sentence reduction. Simply, you will serve every single day of your punishment. This should not be a left or right issue, not a Democrat or Republican issue. It should be about protecting the First Amendment. It's about protecting North Carolinians from living in fear of political violence. Colleagues, my generation is watching. They're asking if we will stand up and say enough is enough. I stand here today inspired by Charlie Kirk, inspired the other young people like myself who believe in freedom, and I urge my colleagues, let's pass this bill and send the clearest possible message that violence and political terrorism have no room in the state of North Carolina or the United States of America. Thank you.
And Representative Cervani, the chair sees the lady's lights on. Chair has reviewed the lady's amendment, and we're going to rule it out of order. Changes the title to the bill, and thus not germane to the bill. So the amendment will be returned to the lady. But does the lady wish to debate the bill?
Yes, Speaker, I would.
Lady's recognized to debate the bill.
Thank you, Speaker. We do have shared values here and shared goals. Colleagues, the purpose of Senate Bill 13 is to say clearly that violence has no place in North Carolina. I agree with that purpose. And our democracy depends on people to be able to speak, run for office, and vote without fear. This is entirely consistent with the spirit of SB 13. And we say that North Carolina will not tolerate violence. We should also say that North Carolina will not tolerate violence against anyone, be it their political, but also who they are. We believe in fundamental freedoms. People often say that Democrats don't, but sometimes I go home and think about how much I agree with Representative Kidwell, and sometimes I do want to attend your meetings. And my colleagues actually say, Maria, you should go on Wednesdays for the free pizza because you have a lot more in common with your colleagues than disagreement.
Are we thinking about the same meetings? The lady can continue.
So I want to stop fear. I need to attend so I can confirm that, actually, Speaker. And encourage more people to serve North Carolina in public life. This bill should help with that, hopefully. And we must make it clear, a clear statement from the General Assembly that we stand on the side of safety and dignity. So passing this bill, unfortunately, it would have been better with the amendment, would have made it more substantial and a comprehensive bill. At the end of the day, we want to protect democracy, promote freedoms, and safeguard North Carolinians from being targeted simply because of who they are, what they believe in, and how they vote. So violence has no place again in North Carolina, and hate has no place in our community. So let's make that clear today, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
What purpose the lady from New Hanover, Representative Butler Rice?
To briefly debate the bill.
Ladies recognized to debate the bill.
I just wanted to tag on to what my colleague was just saying. This is a great opportunity for us. We could have added hate crime legislation to it that would have made it so robust. I know that Representative Majid has put forward an anti-hate crime bill on many occasions, as have many of my colleagues over the years. But we should not tolerate violence of any kind. But we could have talked about targeting people for their race or ethnicity. We could have talked about national origin, religion, disability, gender or sex, sexual orientation. We could have said no violence based on any of these issues in addition. So I think it's an opportunity missed. I hope we'll take it up another time.
For what purpose the lady from Mecklenburg, Representative Cunningham, rise.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to speak to the bill.
Ladies recognized to debate the bill.
Thank you. I'm fine with this bill. Thank you.
For what purpose the gentleman from Durham, Representative Hawkins, rise.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate this being brought up because all of us, of course, are having to make sure that we watch who opens the door at our home. That we know we know who's coming to our home, who's near our home, and who's around our family. It was a shame for all of the outline that Representative Jones, all the people that we've lost as North Carolinians and American citizens because of political violence. It has no place. And I hope that as a part of this, all of us, including our respective parties, those that support us, the apparatus around our political alignments, that everybody takes the time to turn down the political rhetoric. That is one thing if we're talking about promises and if we're serious about doing our best to ensure that there is no political violence in North Carolina and otherwise. Because I'll say this, I don't want anything to happen to any of my colleagues in the North Carolina House of Representatives. Though we disagree with the Senate, I don't want anything to happen to any member of the North Carolina Senate. It would hurt deeply for any of you to be hurt in any way, any form or fashion, and especially because the compassion shown to me in times of loss, anything to any of your families. But we have an obligation that if we put forth this bill to do the work, to turn down the political rhetoric. Because let me tell you where it leads. Very similar to the last situation that was outlined. It puts us in a place where young people are being radicalized. Young people are being isolated. They're listening to these echo chambers and they're acting. It is very clear that that's what's happening, be it Dem or Republican. But the thing I also want to make sure that we also understand is that regardless of race, and race is an issue here, men are the ones that are perpetrating these crimes. We have to take care of the young men in this country. We have to. Young boys are more isolated. They're not achieving as academically as they should. They're falling behind in every way possible. And young men across the board are committing crimes and have been involved in mass shootings and in political violence. And so mentoring programs, all of which have been proposed, all pro dads, getting dads involved in schools, no matter the race. We can outline race for political violence and the demographic will pop up. Every race, every man, every boy, especially boys that are K through 12 and under 30, need to be engaged. Mental health crisis, of course, are ways to get at it, but making sure that we provide mental health services, that we provide anti-isolation services, that we turn down political rhetoric, but most importantly, we find ways for little boys and young men to get involved and engaged in meaningful activity. If we are serious and we want to talk about exactly part of the issue, is that people who get isolated and people who are outside of our political realm, they just don't know that it's rhetoric. They take what we say very seriously. Young men are obviously taking these things very seriously. Young men are actively not where they should be. And so I know that there are some who will say, well, why are we just isolating men? Because we need to. Young boys in this state and this country, but particularly this state, they need us now more than ever. And so I'm willing to work with anyone across the board. I know Representative Willis has put forth some all pro dads, stuff that needs to be addressed. Mentoring. There are clear opportunities for us to be engaged and change the trajectory of our youth, especially young boys in this state. No young man in the state of North Carolina should commit crime, heinous crime, and or political violence. But if they do, it's because we have not taken the appropriate steps to take care of all of our young men. They need us. Things like this should not happen, but I'll end again with the fact that political rhetoric has to be turned down. All of us can do that because all of us have an obligation to keep ourselves safe, keep this body safe, and your family safe. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Quiet for the House as the passage of the House Committee Substitute Senate Bill 13 on its second reading. All those in favor will vote aye. All those opposed will vote no. The clerk will open the vote. Clerk will lock machine and record the vote. 105 having voted in the affirmative and 6 in the negative. House Committee Substitute Senate Bill 13 having passed its second reading and without objection be read a third time.
The General Assembly of North Carolina enacts.
Question for the House is the passage of the House Committee Substitute Senate Bill 13 on its third reading. All those in favor will say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the House Committee Substitute Senate Bill 13 having passed its third reading will be ordered returned to the Senate. For what purpose? The gentleman from Beaufort, Representative Kidwell, rise.
If I may, Speaker, for a point of personal privilege.
Someone's recognized for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, sir. I'd like the record to reflect that this is the third of my colleagues just today from the other side of the aisle that recognized my leadership skill with the Freedom Caucus, and I appreciate that.
I didn't mean to, Mr. Speaker. It was in committee. I didn't mean to.
Are you guys still holding those meetings at Bahama Breeze these days? Okay, members, we'll go back to the top of the calendar now. Mr. Clerk, House Bill 358, the clerk will read.
Representatives Humphrey, Balcom, Setzer, House Bill 358, a bill to be entitled and Continuing Budget Operations Part 2, the General Assembly of North Carolina enacts.
Who's carrying this bill? For what purpose does the gentleman from Union, Representative Arp, arise?
For a motion.
You're recognized for a motion.
I make a motion that we concur in the House Bill 358, Senate Committee Substitute.
Further discussion or debate? Hearing none, the question for the House is the passage of the motion sent forth by the gentleman from Union, Representative Arp. All in favor will vote aye. All opposed will vote no. The clerk will open the vote. Clerk will lock the machine and record the vote. 103 have voted in the affirmative and 6 in the negative. The motion on House Bill 358, Senate Committee Substitute, has passed its motion and will be sent to the governor. Enrolled and sent to the governor by special.